can use their commons room, or some call it the all-purpose room, depends on what complex you live in, and they have designated that area. But because of COVID, it's locked out. Nobody can use it, nobody can go in. So what we did over at Providence, we just decided, hey, let's not let them stop us any longer. Let's take it outside. And I heard somebody earlier in one of the meetings saying that they went outside and the managers followed them across the street or whatever. Well, that's just a violation. And that is something that we don't tolerate, is the violations that management tries to put on us. So it's a very good thing to do the virtual, even though I feel like it's going to be a little bit of test for us over here, because we have the willing people, but it's the virtual. They just don't want to be bothered with that. So another thing that I thought about how to sustain it is if we can get 3 and 4 people to gather together in one apartment building. Now, right now, that might be a task. It's just an idea, but it might be a task because of the COVID. But I'm trying to get them to understand, as long as you stay 6 feet apart and everybody put your mask on, if you got one person in that room that knows how to operate the technical part of it, then you can get a 3 or 4 people in one room. And, and there's enough space that you can be 6 to 8 feet apart from each other, and everybody can still hear, everybody can see, everybody will know what's going on. The most important thing that I feel is don't stop. We cannot let COVID stop us from sustaining your residence meeting, because there's so much information right now that we have to give them, and we haven't been able to do it because we haven't been able to come together. Another thing is you have to encourage them to participate. That's another important thing, is to just participate. If they don't participate, then a whole lot of things can go wrong. Because if they're not there, they're asking for information from other people. The information might go out wrong. And that's the one thing you don't want. You don't want any information to go out wrong because somebody wasn't there and somebody heard something go the other direction. That can cause some friction. That could cause things to get back to management. And then management will think that they have a perfect opportunity to stop, to try to block your residents' meetings, which we all know that based upon this documentation, which is very important that everybody should know, and that's why it's important that when it gets updated, we should have it so that we'll know exactly what is in it and what are they changing about it. Let me see if I can tell you something else right quick, and I'm just going to leave you with this. What I say to all of them when you're starting when you begin your virtual, stand your grounds. That's the most important thing that I feel that works for me when I was trying to organize that one outside. Just stand your grounds and do what you have to do. And I think that everybody could be successful with starting their virtual residence meeting. Have fun with it.
Yes, let's give a round of applause to Ms. Taylor for the excellent work that she's done in organizing her tenant group during this time. And next up to speak will be Ms. Sophia Alcorn from Basta, Austin, Texas.
Yeah, well, actually, just in case there are other technical difficulties, if another tenant speaker wants to go first, I'd be more than happy.
Okay, our next speaker then is Abigail Bartlett. Are you on the line, Abigail?
I am.
Okay, Abigail is from the United Community Housing Corporation in Detroit, Michigan.
Well, I will say, so we kind of started helped us to start some tenant organizations pre-COVID, and so kind of did the transition during COVID. We do some other work with other tenant groups in the city. And one of the things, we created some like how-to documents, which was helpful and passed out. And I think that is shareable that we could from our organization. And actually it's the one that went out. So it was how to Zoom and doing a walkthrough of that. I think there's a really big, there can be a really big technology gap, just access to resources, what kind of technology. And so that was really important. And then one of the things too is having the like technical support, because I think anytime you get on to Zoom, we're having the technical issues now of like, hey, this came up, or I don't even know how to start the Zoom. I think having somebody to assist with that. So with the tenant organizations, I tended to be the Zoom backup of like, hey, call this number. And one suggestion I have is I created a Google account. So if you're like, I don't want to pass out my number, I created, you can, with your Gmail, you can create a free Google phone number at voice.google.com, which is a good resource if that's, I don't know how people feel about passing out their phone number. And so, yes, I think probably, as you're familiar with in tenant buildings and a lot of people have smartphones, which is good. And that's a good tool, or like having people, closing the technology gap that it can be used as a conference call. I think that's more of the like technical side of things, which I think can often be the biggest hurdle, because people want to be engaged if they were already engaged, and just being able to leverage networks. So a lot of the times when we would call, if we can't flyer, I would call the contacts that I had and say, hey, do you think anybody else would be interested in joining this? Can we get their contact information, or can I give you my contact information? So just a whole different way of like, how do you make those new connections?
Yeah, every little bit of information that you've given us is helpful. And we do have to work to close that technology gap. One question, you often mention smartphones. But I have an Android, and I found, depending on the model, yes, it gives you access to Zoom and other ways to join in on a conference call either. So I don't want individuals to think that they necessarily have to go out and spend money on a smartphone, but they can also get connected if they have an Android.
Yep, yeah, exactly. And so that, while you can't share some of the like information, like you can't see the screen, people can still be engaged. And I think if that's the case, and you know people who, whether they don't have technology, maybe they're older and they don't know how to use it, or they're younger, like it doesn't matter, whoever it is, being able to, and this becomes difficult, which was if you were on the HUD call earlier, where they were talking about like our tenant groups our administrations or management companies aren't printing the materials. It's, can you send materials to people? So like our organization, we have the capacity to support a couple of those tenant groups to print materials, and then we do a lot of mailers. Or maybe you have somebody that can print it. Postage gets expensive. Is then do people have floor captains for their groups? And so you kind of got to be careful. We had a group do during COVID, like to pass stuff out. They did do wellness checks, and they did go around the floor captains, but they followed protocol, wear masks, would not stand back. Whether that's advisable or not, don't take my.
You're not the CDC, but
I'm not the CDC. Yeah. And a lot of people, right, like we know this, asking around how people can engage in that, because people have great ideas, and leveraging like the resources and the contacts is really important, because you're going to be making a lot of phone calls, and probably a lot of individual phone calls.
Well, thank you very much, Abigail. Sophia, are you ready?
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna, if it's okay with everyone, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. So just to introduce myself first, my name is Sophia. I'm a tenant organizer with Building and Strengthening Tenant Action, or BASTA for short. We're basically a nonprofit based out of Austin, Texas. We support a number of tenants associations in the area, including a couple of, more than a couple of HUD subsidized properties. And I'm actually joined here today by Maddie Gonzalez. She's one of our tenant leaders. Maddie, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yes, my name is Madeline Gonzalez, and I'm from Riverside Townhome Apartments in Austin, Texas, also with the Tenant Association here.
Yeah, so like many people, some of the challenges that pretty much every single organizer had to overcome once we all went into lockdown is, having to move everything to online meeting spaces, and like still finding ways to like move forward with different campaigns and building communities while in social isolation. So some of the strategies and tools that BASTA and the TAs that we work with developed like early on to just kind of help us with this transition. Well, first, it's not just Zoom, which I'm sure everyone here is more than familiar with by now. But also, a lot of the tenant leaders that we work with are actually monolingual Spanish speakers. So, like doing a lot of trial and error and figuring out how to use like the Zoom interpretation feature, which I have like here a little like image of. That was really, really helpful in just kind of like facilitating this process as well. Some of the tenants associations, including Riverside Townhomes, also created Facebook groups after we all went into lockdown, just to kind of keep the lines of communication open between like board members and other residents. And like where we could also like post like frequent updates and things like that. And of course, like like many organizing groups, a lot of Boston's bread and butter, as well as the TAs that we work with, is going around door to door and talking to folks, circulating petitions to advocate for like better conditions at properties. So one thing we found, or two websites that we found helpful as we kind of move things to virtual spaces are change.org and Action Network. Both of those are websites where you could publish virtual petitions. Although between the two, I would definitely recommend Action Network since it's much easier to use than change.org and there's not as many hoops to jump through. And also like just putting together like, one pagers, know your rights materials, like PNGs that you could then share with people through mass text, like things like CARES Act protections for people living in subsidized properties, like that was just a good way to just kind of like stay in touch with people and let them know that like, like TA leaders and everyone still have back and we're still available for them. And also just having like, links to local COVID-19 resources handy, things like local food pantries, healthcare resources. But even then, like there's still a lot of obstacles that we encountered when implementing these strategies. Some of y'all have mentioned the fact that, not everyone necessarily has like the technical equipment or the technical know-how to be able to attend online meetings, let alone, publish and circulate virtual petitions. And even Zoom itself, as everyone here is more than familiar with by now, has its fair share of technical problems. Links don't always work. Sometimes you unexpectedly just get kicked out of a meeting. And on top of that, it's also just like not very intuitive for someone who's never done video conferencing before. And the same thing goes for like the Zoom interpretation feature. It's been really helpful for us, but there was a lot of trial and error at first when we're trying to figure it out, and sometimes it doesn't work. And on top of that, like one-on-one calls and mass texting is great, but another issue is that, we don't always have everyone's up-to-date contact information. People move in and out of properties. So, it became really apparent how important it was to address what we call the digital divide, or I think it was Abigail who mentioned, like called it the technological gap. One of the first things we tried out is, connecting folks with digital resources to just kind of like facilitate this process as we move everything to online spaces. Boston, my organization, we were very fortunate to receive a Google Fiber grant. And with that, we were able to purchase some Chromebooks that we could then loan out to some of the tenant leaders we work with. Maddie actually has been using one of them. Maddie, do you want to talk a bit about your experiences with the Chromebook and other tech stuff?
Yes, sure. So thanks to Google Fiber and Basta, I was able to receive one of these Chromebooks. They call them a notebook. And so it's a process in learning, but you have technical support. I was glad to receive that. There's times where on Zoom here, it would say high CPU usage, connection is unstable. It's across the screen, but we still are able to connect with Zoom. So therefore, I'm thankful for that. You can also learn, I've also learned screenshotting with this computer, and I'm sure you'll probably be able to do it with any computer for that matter. You would hit Control, and if you look on the top of the bar there, you would have a box with 2 lines to the right, and you would hold on Control and click that button, and you can screenshot the entire screen that you have, and it's perfect for notes. I've been using that, so I can look back into meetings or anything that I need to look back into, and it'll save it. So those are grateful things for this type of technology.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, like things like that that just make it easier to, like, you know, share notes and resources, like, you know, between TA members or organizers and board members. And another, I think, I'm not sure if you already mentioned this, Maddie, but another cool thing about the Chromebooks is that it's set up to where, like, you know, if you're having technical difficulties, you can access like Chrome remote support, which is basically a feature where you could, like, you know, be on the phone with someone, request support, and read out a code for them, and then like the other person on the line can then just, like, you know, access your computer remotely and just troubleshoot some problems.
Right.
So, like, you know, yeah, just having someone, you know, having technical support, as Abigail mentioned, you know, is really, really important and has helped us a lot through this process. One particular example I can think of is we have a TA here in Austin who, for the past several months, they had been meeting up to like 3 nights a week. And all this was in preparation for the sale of the property to the residents themselves. So, you know, once we went virtual, you know, after, like, you know, mid-March, whenever we went into lockdown, there were a lot of challenges. One being that many of the board members were monolingual Spanish speakers. Another one being that, you know, one of the leaders had never used a computer before, and the only technological equipment he had was a flip phone. So after a bunch of trial and error, we were also able to get him set up with a Chromebook. And one of the cool things is that after a while, we developed a how to use your Chromebook guide. And the interpretation team that we work with here in Austin also put together a really helpful how to use Zoom interpretation guide. So with all that, you know, we were able to, you know, like, facilitate this transition to online spaces, and the board members were still able to meet on a weekly basis. And well, long story short, as of the end of May, they actually now officially own their property. So, you know, like, it all comes to show that there are still ways to build power even within social isolation. And yeah, you know, like, as you know, as y'all were mentioning, you know, having tech support has also been really helpful. You know, having one person for every TA meeting or meeting with third parties, having one designated person who can be on standby, you know, usually someone who's tech savvy. That way, if someone is having problems, you know, you could easily call them and they can walk you through all of it. And another thing that's been pretty helpful is the use of QR codes. I have an example of one here. Basically, what we were able to do is generate a QR code that is linked to an online petition. So what we did is that we put it on a flyer, and that way tenants, what they could do is just take a picture of that QR code with their phone, and that would automatically take them to the online petition. So yeah, just with all this, you know, we've been able to find ways to get creative and still, like, build community. You know, for folks whose up-to-date contact information we have, obviously phone banking and mass texting has been really helpful, like disseminating all that information we talked about earlier. But for folks who don't have up-to-date contact information for, you know, occasionally we've done very limited flyering with safe practices and plenty of social isolation. So this is, like, useful for getting folks connected with the TA and inviting them to join the Facebook group. And it's been especially helpful at one of the senior properties we organize at, who, also like are not, are less likely to have the technological resources. Distributing face masks has also been great for power building at one of the TAs at one of the properties we organize at, because you have people who are coming up to the board members for face masks, and from there they get to talk about the Tenants Association and everything they're working on. And also like community education, having Facebook Lives, like it's not only great for like disseminating important information such as like rights and protections during COVID-19, but also just as a way for people to continue to get involved and feel like they're a part of something. And a lot of times we've also just have to be like creative and flexible with remote outreach, like I said, not everyone is going to be able to sign a virtual petition for XYZ reason. They don't have a smartphone or they don't have much experience navigating online petitions. So just like adapting and being okay with, for example, like text authorization for signatures. And also like just still setting up moving forward with virtual meetings with officials and third parties. Like Maddie, for example, she's been involved with a group of tenants that for the past year have been meeting with local city code officials to advocate for better practices. Maddie, I don't know, do you want to talk a bit about like, what you guys have been working on and how you were able to transition to virtual meetings?
Sure. So like last week we had a meeting with the Austin code, Austin City Code, and that meeting was pretty successful. We were able to communicate points and meet with the local officials there. So we spoke about concerns like mold issues, repairs, and to also give an opportunity to have virtual inspections for tenants and enforce communication, especially now more than ever, because there's some landlords that just want to avoid and just kind of hide behind this pandemic that we're going through and not doing any face interviews or whatnot unless it's really necessary, but it's just their way of saying we don't want to deal with this. So it's important now more than ever to have virtual inspections, virtual meetings with the landlords, because if anything goes wrong in the house, you could actually show them virtually, look, this is the problem, and to have any type of communication, which is better than no communication at all. So we brought these points up to the city council there in code, and we found the meeting to be pretty successful, and we're going to meet again with them in a few weeks from now.
Thank you, Maddie. Yeah, no, I agree with you there that just like any communication is better than that. And I think like that's just been the main takeaway for the past few months. It's not always perfect. There's definitely been a lot of growing pains, but just like finding any ways to just keep people engaged, it's better than nothing. And like this has definitely been a learning process for us. We're still figuring things out a lot, but like I think like just based on just like our experiences and Maddie's experiences and everyone else's experiences for like, since March or whenever we first went into lockdown, it's the fact that a lot of times you really just got to be flexible and be willing to meet people where they are, and just have a lot of patience, especially.
Well, thank you very much, Sophia. And I see Abigail, you're back.
I know, y'all. Sorry.
Okay, at this time, we still have some time left. So I'd like to take just maybe about 15 minutes, because I did send out a chat to everyone to let you know that the last 10 minutes or so, we want Abigail to be able to give us the instructions on how we'll be able to write our workshop evaluation. So for the next 15 minutes, I'd like to give some other tenant association members on a call opportunity if you could just take 2 or 3 minutes. If you want to share with the group some of your experiences with actually organizing meetings virtually. Is that okay with everyone, with the group?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have nothing against you.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
My name is William. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I was talking and then this all just went cut off. So we're having technical difficulties. But what I'm sharing is, as I was telling you, if y'all remember that this group was very successful in its first trial with management. 100% successful. Everything we asked for, we got. And after that, I don't know, for some reason, the group just fell apart. And one of the main things was that we had volunteers in there at this last meeting. And basically, they, after the meeting was over, they kind of started their own meeting. And I was told that people who don't live in the building should not be on any type of panel or any type of board or anything, which is what I was doing, learning. And some of the people who lived in the building didn't like it, and there was dispute and envy and jealousy and fighting. And basically, right now, the whole thing is dead. And I've been working with Michael, so I've been working, so I'm getting some more guidance. And it, like he showed me, that basically start another group. But I come up with a lot of good ideas, but I guess maybe I have a big ego. Maybe that's what was behind it. I don't know.
No,
But
Mr. Williams.
I didn't hear that.
I said no. I think everyone has voiced some difficulty with keeping their membership, together, and different changes that take place.
Yes.
But I think, as Michael was saying, continues to encourage you. This opportunity to do it virtually, if you give it a shot, it might be able to reach more people. Because
Yeah.
maybe, you'll have those that aren't able to get out, but now they can call in.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's give it another shot using the virtual method, and especially with the information Sophia shared with us. And let's see if we can change things for you a little bit moving forward.
Yeah. Well, I'm part of the Marcus Garvey Tenant organization, so that's in Massachusetts, Roxbury, Mass.
Okay.
But
Well,
it's so baffling, because if I started something and nothing happened, or maybe 3 things didn't happen, and some things happened, I could see squawking and complaining, but everything, this was 100% successful.
okay.
That's what the baffling part about it is,
Well, that's something that you can use moving forward,
Yeah.
because if you got some successes in there to rebound on. And I'd
Yeah.
like to thank you for taking the time to share your story with us. Let's see if there is another Tenant Association member. Okay, let's call on Miss Marsha Kimmel. She'd like to speak.
Hi, yes, I'm Marsha Kimmel, and I co-chair the Tenants Association with Stefan, who's also, I think he's on the line. We just started to do our Tenants Association meeting virtually. We had one meeting, and even when we can do it in person, we never have 100% attendance.
Mhm.
I mean, that's for sure. However, I think we had maybe 18 people, and that's a good start. The thing that I wanted to ask, because we're going to keep on going, we're supposed to have had our Tenants Association elections, and we're thinking about, like, how can we do this virtually? Can we still do it? I love the idea of the survey, and we can do that. And I love the idea of having help people, helping people who are more new to doing stuff online to have like maybe a teacher or someone who can help them. I think people really need to be connected, and they
Yes.
need community more than anything right now. So we do perceive that there's a need for our tenants association, just to give people a place to go and be connected. Because that's one of the things I really love about Redwood Gardens, is that it has a community. So anyhow, I'm wondering if anybody has any insight into how we could run an election virtually.
Well, we're finding ourselves, I mentioned at the beginning of the call, the Grove Park Tenant Association here in Chicago. We were in the middle of elections at the time that the COVID happened. So we're going to pick up where we left out virtually. But the biggest question is, we can get everybody on the line, on the call. We have our nominees already completed. We're in the voting process. So our question is now, do we handle the voting on a Zoom with a representative from the Metropolitan Tenant Organization who oversees our elections? Or does that election need to still be held with a paper and ballot box and somehow place somewhere where individuals, and we're thinking about using the garden area of our senior building since it's outdoors, and we can definitely wear masks and distance ourselves at 6 feet, to have a box out there in the general garden area where people can still come and then cast their ballot. Metropolitan Tenant Organization's representative will then take the box and he'll tally the votes, and then we'll have a meeting following that to announce the new elected officer.
Tara, I have a suggestion for you. This is Greg Ledbetter in San Francisco. Monkey Survey has a way that you can make a survey out, and if you are still doing things virtually, you could probably send it out in an email and have them vote that way. I don't know how the process is so far as counting the ballots go, but that information can be gotten and distributed to whoever needs to have it.
So I think that's a good idea. Thank you, Gregory. However, and I'll look into it. I know the people who do monkey script. What's it called?
Survey Monkey.
Survey
Yeah,
Monkey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing.
We just have a hard time with people not being online. They just have never done it, or they don't know how to do it, or they'll do it, but they don't. We need to have kind of an educational period here. I think. And
a coaching to make them feel comfortable. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. We have time for one more tenant association to share. Go ahead, Ms. Smith. I see you raising your hand, Mr. Smith. All right.
I'm Deborah Brown of Newark, New Jersey. And our problem is we have a lot of intimidation by management to keep us from creating a tenant association. And then, I hate to say it, we have some people that are mules for management. Okay, now with COVID, okay, we had to delay it. But however, can someone please tell me how we can? I've tried talking to different tenants to bring them in, before COVID came along, but a lot of them are scared. Like for instance, one of our a tenant spoke to me just today, and he said that right after he will no longer be coming to the tenants meeting because right after that, someone went in and spoke to management. And management called him downstairs and told him that his rent was going up to $200, and it did. And then there are other things. There was another tenant, her apartment was robbed, but no one had keys but management as intimidation, and stole all of her food, shoes, and clothing. And we're not allowed to have locks on our doors because we just had new locks. they use excuse that they changed the locks because someone tried to break into someone else's house. But the only person that, and since having the locks changed, the same management went in and robbed another tenant.
Now, let me ask you this really quickly, because I think what you're the issues you're addressing, there is another workshop that is scheduled to talk specifically about some of the instances that you're mentioning,
Okay.
about
Well, how can we
problems
bring
with
them back? How can we
property management, and but for your tenant association, it's like, I think Ms. Taylor, Odita showed us 2 documents that is very important.
We
One
had
is,
that.
right, so now it is about just being a advocate and trying, it won't happen overnight, but enticing and sharing information with individuals as you can. It is still a choice that they have to join. But the more you can show them, I guess, in conversation, we all know that it's not a walk in the park, but the more information you can share with them in instances, you know, inviting them to things like this, then they can become more informed and make a better decision. But what I'd like to do at this time, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but we want to, at least we may be able to come back, but we want to get Abigail on the line here. So